Welcome back to Thinking Readers, where children listen to stories and learn to think. Today is day 18 of our story advent calendar. Yesterday we read The Wombles. We looked at the character of Bungo and how the writer sets him up for a bit of a dressing down. The Wombles choose their names from Great Uncle Bulgaria's atlas, and your task was to choose a name for yourself from any kind of map that you liked. Could be a country map, could be a very small local map. And I said that I would do the same for donkey and horse. Shall I tell you what donkey and horse are going to be known as from now on? Let's start with donkey. Donkey thought that it was Christmas time that he would like to choose Bethlehem. And I thought, well, that's pretty topical, that makes sense. But then he considered he was a boy, and if he shortened Bethlehem, he would be known as Beth. So he changed his mind, and he has chosen Jerusalem, as Jesus travels into Jerusalem on a donkey. So this is Jerry, and he will be known as Jerry from this point forth. Horse. He spent a bit of time considering his name, and he loves everything about America, the US of A, North America. And so he went looking for a place where there are lots of horses in America, and he chose Texas. His nickname is Tex. So from this point forth, horse will be known as Tex. So we have Jerry and Tex. I have to remember that. What name did you choose for yourself? If you're not happy with your name, pick another one. Our book today is A Boy Called Christmas by Matt Haig. Matt Haig has written lots of books for children. He's prolific, but this book is very topical and great fun. Have a look at the front cover and see if you can make your prediction about this story. Let's get reading. An Ordinary Boy. You're about to read the true story of Father Christmas. Yes, Father Christmas. You may wonder how I know the true story of Father Christmas, and I will tell you, you shouldn't really question such things. Not right at the start of a book. It's rude, for one thing. All you need to understand is I do know the story of Father Christmas, or else why would I be writing it? Maybe you don't call him Father Christmas. Maybe you call him something else. Santa, or Saint Nick, or Santa Claus, or Sinterklaas, or Kris Kringle, or Peltznickel, or Papa Noel, or Strange Man with a Big Belly who gives me presents. Or maybe you have a name you've come up with all by yourself, just for fun. If you were an elf, though, you would always call him Father Christmas. It was the pixies who started calling him Santa Claus and spread the word just to confuse things in their mischievous way. But whatever you happen to call him, you know about him, and that's the main thing. Can you believe there was a time when nobody knew about him? A time when he was just an ordinary boy named Nicholas, living in the middle of nowhere, or the middle of Finland, doing nothing with magic except believing in it. A boy who knew very little about the world except the taste of mushroom soup, the feel of the cold north wind, and the stories he was told, and who only had a doll made out of a turnip to play with. But life was going to change for Nicholas in ways he could never have imagined. Things were going to happen to him. Good things, bad things, impossible things. But if you are one of those people who believe that some things are impossible, you should put this book down right away. It's most certainly not for you, because this book is full of impossible things. Are you still reading the book? Good. Elves would be proud. Then let us begin. A woodcutter's son. Now, Nicholas was a happy boy. Well, actually, no. He would have told you he was happy if you'd asked him, and he certainly tried to be happy. But sometimes being happy is quite tricky. I suppose what I'm saying is Nicholas was a boy who believed in happiness, the way he believed in elves and trolls and pixies. But he'd actually never seen an elf, a troll or a pixie, and he hadn't really seen proper happiness either. At least, not for a very long time. He didn't have it that easy. Take Christmas. This is the list of every present Nicholas had received for Christmas in his entire life. 1. A wooden sleigh. 2. A doll carved from a turnip. That's it. The truth is that Nicholas's life was hard, but he made the best of it. He had no brothers or sisters to play with, and the nearest town, Christi nan Cowpunky, was a long way away. It took even longer to get to than it did to pronounce. And anyway, there wasn't much to do in Christi nan Cowpunky, except go to church or look in the window of the toy shop. "Papa, look! A wooden reindeer!" Nicholas would gasp as he pressed his nose against the glass of the toy shop. Or, "Look, an elf doll!" Or, "Look, a cuddly doll made of the king!" And once he even asked, "Can I have one?" He looked up at his father's face, a long and thin face with a thick, bushy eyebrow and skin rougher than old shoes in the rain. "Do you know how much it is?" said Joel, his father. "No," said Nicholas, and then his father held up his left hand, fingers stretched. He only had 4.5 fingers on his left hand because of an accident with an axe. A horrible accident. Lots of blood. And we probably shouldn't dwell on it too much, as this is a Christmas story. 4.5 rubles? His father looked cross. No, 5. 5 rubles. And 5 rubles for an elf doll is too much money. You could buy a cottage for that. I thought cottages cost 100 rubles, Papa. Don't try and be clever, Nicholas. I thought you said I should try to be clever. Not right now, said his father. And anyway, why would you need an elf doll when you've the turnip doll your mother made? Couldn't you pretend the turnip is an elf? Yes, Papa, of course, Nicholas said, because he didn't want to make his father upset. Don't worry, son. I'll work so hard that one day I'll be rich and you can have all the toys you want and we can have a real horse with your own coach and ride into town like a king and a prince. Don't work too hard, Papa, said Nicholas. You need to play sometimes too, and I am happy with my turnip doll. But his father had to work hard, chopping wood all day, every day. He worked as soon as it was light to when it was dark. The trouble is we live in Finland, his father explained on the day our story starts. Doesn't everyone live in Finland? Asked Nicholas. It was morning. They were heading out into the forest, passing the old stone well that they could never look at. The ground was dusted with a thin layer of snow. Joel had an axe on his back. The blade dazzled in the cold morning sun. No, said Joel, some people live in Sweden, and there are about 7 people who live in Norway, maybe even 8. The world is a big place. So what is the problem with living in Finland, Papa? Trees. Trees? I thought you liked trees. That's why you chop them down. But there are trees everywhere, so no one pays much for... Joel stopped and turned around. What is it, Papa? I thought I heard something. They saw nothing but birch and pine trees and shrubs of herbs and heather. A tiny red-breasted bird sat on a branch. Must have been nothing, Joel said, unsure. Joel stared up at a giant pine, pressed his hand on the rough bark. This is the one. He began chopping, and Nicholas began his search for mushrooms and berries. Nicholas only had a single mushroom in his basket when he caught a glimpse of an animal in the distance. Nicholas loved animals, but mainly saw only birds, mice and rabbits. Sometimes he would see a moose. But this was something much bigger and stronger. A bear, a giant brown bear, about 3 times the size of Nicholas, standing on its hind legs, its huge paws scooping berries into its mouth. Nicholas's heart started a drum roll with excitement. He decided to get a closer look. He walked quietly forward. He was quite close now. I know that bear. The terrifying moment when he realized he recognized the bear was also the one when he stepped on a twig and it cracked. The bear turned, stared straight at him. Nicholas felt something grab his arm hard. He turned to see his father looking crossly down at him. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You'll get yourself killed." His dad's grip was so tight it hurt, but then he let go. "Be the forest," whispered Joel. This was something he always said whenever danger was around, but Nicholas never knew what it meant. He just stayed still, but it was too late. Nicholas remembered when he was 6 years old, with his mother, his jolly, singing, rosy-cheeked mother. They'd been going to get some water from the well when they'd seen the exact same bear. His mother had told Nicholas to run back to the cottage, and Nicholas had run. She hadn't. Nicholas watched his father hold his axe with a stronger grip, but he saw his father's hands tremble. He pulled Nicholas back behind him in case the bear charged. "Run," his father said. "No, I'm staying with you." It was unclear if the bear was going to chase them. It probably wasn't. It was probably too old and tired, but it did roar at them. Then right at that moment, there was a whistling sound. Nicholas felt something brush against his ear like a fast feather. A moment later, a grey feathered arrow pierced the tree beside the bear's head. The bear went down on all fours and sloped away. Nicholas and Joel looked behind them, trying to see who'd fired the arrow, but there was nothing but pine trees. "It must be the hunter," said Joel. A week before, they'd found an injured moose with the same grey-feathered arrow sticking out of it. Nicholas had made his father help the poor creature. He'd watched him gather snow and press it against the wound before pulling the arrow out. They kept staring through the trees. A twig cracked, but they didn't see anything. "All right, Christmas, let's go," Joel said. Nicholas hadn't been called that for a long time. Back in the old days, his father used to joke about and have fun. He used to call everyone nicknames. Nicholas's mother was Sweetbread, even though her real name was Lijah, and Nicholas himself was nicknamed Christmas because he'd been born on Christmas Day. His father had even engraved his wooden sleigh with the nickname. "Look at him, Sweetbread, our little boy Christmas." He was hardly ever called that now. "But don't go spying on bears, okay? You will get yourself killed. Stay near me. You're still clearly a boy." A little later, after Joel had been chopping for an hour, he sat down on a tree stump. "I could help you," offered Nicholas. His father held up his left hand. "That is what happens when 11-year-old boys use axes," he said. So Nicholas just kept his eyes to the ground, looking for mushrooms, and wondered if being 11 years old was ever going to be any fun. The Cottage and the Mouse. The cottage where Nicholas and Joel lived was the smallest cottage in the whole of Finland. It only had one room. So the bedroom was also the kitchen, the living room, and the bathroom. Actually, there was no bath. There wasn't even a toilet. The toilet was just a massive deep hole in the ground outside. The house had 2 beds with mattresses stuffed with straw and feathers. The sledge was always kept outside, but Nicholas kept his turnip doll beside the bed to remind him of his mother. But Nicholas didn't mind. It didn't really matter how small your house was if you had a big imagination. And Nicholas spent his time daydreaming and thinking of magical things like pixies and elves. The best part of Nicholas's day was bedtime, because this was when his father would tell him a story. A little brown mouse, who was Nicholas's, named Micah, would sneak into the warmth of the cottage and listen too. Well, Nicholas liked to think that Micah was listening, but really he was just fantasising about cheese, which took quite a lot fantasising, as Micah was a forest mouse, and there weren't any cows or goats in the forest, and he'd never even seen or smelt cheese, let alone tasted it. But Micah, like all mice, believed in the existence of cheese, and knew it would taste very, very good if he got such an opportunity. Anyway, Nicholas would lie there in the happy coziness of his bedclothes and listen intently to his father's stories. Joel always looked tired. He had rings under his eyes. He seemed to get a new one every year, like a tree. "Now," said his father that night, "what story would you like tonight?" "I'd like you to tell me about the elves." "Again? You've been told about the elves every night since you were 3. Please, Papa, I like to hear about them. So Joel told a story about the elves of the far north who lived beyond the only mountain in Finland, a secret mountain that some people doubt is there. The elves lived in a snow-covered village called Elfhelm, surrounded by wooded hills. Are they real, Papa? Nicholas asked. Yes, I've never seen them, his father said sincerely, but I believe they are, and sometimes believing is as good as knowing. And Nicholas agreed, but Micah the Mouse disagreed, or he would have done if he understood. If he understood, he would have said, I'd rather taste real cheese than believe in it. But for Nicholas it was enough. Yes, Papa, I know that believing is as good as knowing. I believe the elves are friendly. Do you? Yes, said Joel, and they wear brightly coloured clothes. You wear colourful clothes, Papa. This was true, but Joel's clothes were made from leftover rags he got for free from the tailors in town. He'd made himself multicoloured patchwork trousers and a green shirt, and best of all, a big floppy red hat with a white furry trim and a white cotton bobble. Oh yes, I do, but my clothes are getting old and tatty. The elves' clothes always look brand new, and he stopped right there. There was a noise outside, and a moment later came 3 hard knocks on the door. Exciting. Should we try and summarise the story so far? Have a go by yourself. Nicholas lives with his woodcutter father in Finland. One day when they're in the forest cutting wood, a bear appears, the very same bear that killed Nicholas's mother. An arrow whizzes past, frightens the bear away, and they suspect it's the arrow of a hunter. While Joel is reading Nicholas stories in bed that night, there come 3 loud knocks on the door. Do you remember at the beginning, the narrator was addressing us directly, and he told us, I'm going to tell you the real story of Father Christmas. Now, how do we know that when the narrator tells people this, they don't usually believe him? How can we tell that? By the way that he speaks to us, that most people don't usually believe him when he says he knows the true story. You are about to read the true story of Father Christmas. Yes, Father Christmas. He anticipates us saying, really? Oh no. And he says, yes. And then he goes on to insist that he knows the true story, and why would he bother telling it if it wasn't true? He also accuses us of being what if we doubt him? Rude. He's defensive, isn't he? And this would suggest that he normally gets a negative or doubtful reaction from people when he tells them the story. What's the effect, do you think, of starting the story in this way? So he tells us, this is the real story of Father Christmas, and you must believe me, it's true. What's the effect of that? Why does he do that? How do you as a reader receive that message? What does it make you think? He wants us to know that the story is real. Rather than reading the whole story and getting to the end and wondering, is it real? He wants us to start the story knowing that it is real. And why does that make a difference? If the story's real, how does that change things for us, the reader? Well, I would suggest that it makes us more vested in the story, to care about the story more and care more about these characters. And after all, Christmas is to do with all of us, isn't it? We all care about Christmas. And we want Christmas to be true. So in that way, he brings us in as the reader to really be on side with the story and believe in it. Did that work for you? Was it effective for you? Did you feel, okay, I'm convinced by that? There was something he said about the pixies and elves that I thought gave credibility to what he was saying, so made it more believable, because he said it was the pixies who started calling him Santa Claus and spread the word just to confuse things in their mischievous way. So he gives us a bit of more insider information early on. So I found it quite effective, and I'm believing him that he really knows. What was your feeling about the characters Joel and Nicholas? How did you feel about them? Did you feel a little bit sorry for them? Why would we feel a little bit sorry for them? So Nicholas's mother, Joel's wife, was killed by a bear. That's a great sadness there. And they're also incredibly poor, and the father's working incredibly hard and is obviously very protective of Nicholas, so he can't do much apart from just gathering bits and bobs in the forest, berries and so on. So there's that sense of pathos around these two characters. Do you recall during Stuart Little we talked about pathos, that combination of pity and sadness you might feel for a character? But what, similarly to Stuart Little, were there any funny elements that lifted the sadness in these chapters? Do you remember when Nicholas is asking for the doll and his father says, "Do you know how much it costs?" He holds up his hand, and his hand looks something like that. And he said, "How much?" He holds up his hand, and what does Nicholas say? 4.5 rubles? Why does he say only 4.5 rubles? Exactly, because his father's only got 4.5 fingers. And then he says, stop trying to be clever. And he said, "I thought you wanted me to be clever, father." How is the humour created in that moment? Because Nicholas is taking everything very literally, isn't he? And that creates a funny scene. He's distracting from the seriousness of his father. And what's the effect of the mouse that comes into chapter 2? It's also quite funny, isn't it? You've got this internal thought process of the mouse who's always thinking about cheese. The narrator is really emphatic that this is the true story of Father Christmas, and he's quite defensive about it. However, when Joel is talking to Nicholas about the elves, what does Joel say when Nicholas asks if the elves are real? What does he say? Do you remember? "I believe they are, and sometimes believing is as good as knowing." Something for you to consider. Do you think that believing is as good as knowing? Do you believe that believing something is true is as good as knowing that it's true? What do you think? Grab a parent, pet or toy and have a discussion about that. Until tomorrow, goodbye.